Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of the Major Applications Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Eddie Labour, the committee chairman. Can I do apologies for absence first, please?
Apologies received from Councillor Oswell with Councillor Tony Egginton substituting.
Okay, thank you. Can I do declarations of interest in matters coming before tonight's meeting, Councillor Higgins?
Yeah, a bit long-winded, but the former manager of the Arms Houses was one of my very good friends of mine. Unfortunately, he died last year. But and also the chairman of this is also on my branch, so Conservative branch. So I'm declaring a interest. I think I can sit here, but I don't think I should really take part because I don't think that would be quite right.
You're going to stay. Have a legal ruling.
You can sit in and not vote, or you can leave for the item. You can stay for the discussion. Well, you can stay and not vote.
Either way, you'll just stay out of the discussion. I'll just stay out of the discussion. Okay, there are no matters notified in advance or as urgent. There is a change to tonight's running order. We have a petition on item 9, Woodbridge House, so that becomes our second item of the night. So the running order is 5, 9, and then 6, 7, 8. Okay, 5, 9, 6, 7, 8. So 2 petition items, and the remainder do not have. Okay, in terms of the running of tonight's meeting, all applications will have an officer presentation which supplements the written report members have already had and considered, and in addition to the addendum, copies of which should be available to you. For those items where there is a petition, the petitioners have 5 minutes to address us. You get 4 green, 1 amber, and when it gets to red, you've had your time. Members may choose to ask you questions or they may not, but that's entirely their choice. On all applications where there is a petition, regardless of whether the petitioners speak or not, the applicant or their agent has the right to speak again for 5 minutes. There are no ward councillors who have notified me on tonight, but if any do appear and wish to speak, they of course can. Apart from that, there are no other rights to address this meeting. So once you've made your speech, done the questions from members, that's it. We don't run a debate from the floor. Just in terms of the health and safety, as usual, the fire exits are one behind me and one over there. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarm goes, we will be leaving. Could I ask, please, that when your item is done, you don't congregate immediately beyond the door, because we do need to continue working, and your best exit, if we do have to exit quickly, will be through those doors, through the next set of double doors and down the big spiral staircase, ordinarily. That, I think, covers the administration of the night. The voting members of committee tonight are, and I'll start on my far right, I've got Councillor Stead, Councillor Morgan, Councillor Yarrow, Councillor Higgins, Councillor Edwards, and on my left, Councillor Edgington, Councillor Dillon, and Councillor Duncan. Sorry, my brain just went for 10 seconds. I don't know why. It does happen to me. Yeah, don't tell me I'm getting to your age, David. Yeah, that's very worrying, isn't it? Yeah, it is the heat tonight, yeah. You may notice, many people haven't got jackets or ties on tonight. It is likely to get, it is quite okay in here at the minute, but this room does have a habit as the evening goes on of getting very hot. So it is going to be one of those evenings. The officer team tonight is slightly larger than usual because they're doing a bit of mix and match presenting for us. So James McClellan-Smith and Ed Lawton will alternate. Alan Tilley is doing highways. James Roger is the head of planning and provides advice. Anisha Teji is Democratic Services, and my clerk, Amrasheen Hogan, is my lawyer for tonight. Right. Without any further complications, this meeting, by the way, is on YouTube, so it is out there in public. If you are speaking, and I would apply that to everybody around me as well as those in the audience, please make sure you are close to your microphones that we can hear you, because that is the record that goes out. If you are sitting down where you all are now, you are not visible, but when you get to that table, you are. So that's just tells you when you're on camera. Okay, can I start, please, with item 522, New Road, Hillingdon. James.
Thank you, Chair. Evening, everybody. So, item 5 on your agenda is an application for the erection of 8 new dwellings at 22 New Road in Hillingdon. The site is currently occupied by a group of single-storey flat-roof buildings that are used to house a car repairs garage. The proposed scheme would remove all of the existing buildings on the site and replace with 8 residential units consisting of 4 3-bedroom dwellings, 2 2-bedroom apartments and 2 1-bedroom apartments. Each unit will be served by a designated parking space, and there will be additional parking for visitors with a total of 12 spaces provided. The existing grass verge on the north side of Connaught Close, which is under Council Highways control, will need to be crossed over, and a dropped curb and hard surface crossover will be installed to facilitate this. And a legal agreement is proposed to secure new bollards to be installed alongside the crossover to prevent vehicles encroaching onto the grass verge, and also to secure additional landscape planting on the verge. I'll just take you through the slides now to show you the plans and photographs for the site. This is just the standard location plan for the site. You can see it's triangular in shape, and all of those buildings shown in that area are currently part of the garage operation. Here we just have the constraints plans, which show there's no real specific designations to the site. This is the layout plan that has been amended and supplied. The original scheme was for 9 dwellings and included a wider crossover section on the verge. Right. Oh, apologies, got a bit glitchy. That's just a parking layout plan. I'm not sure how clear that is to you, but all of the circles mark a parking space for the development. So you can see there's a cluster of buildings that are served by parking towards the Hammerhead, and then adjacent to the building facing onto Connaught Close, that's where the crossover of the verge is, and there's 4 parking spaces there. This is just a floor layout plan for plots 1 and 2, which are a semi-detached group of 3-bedroom dwellings. And here we have the elevations for those dwellings. I'm not quite sure, this plan doesn't seem to have pulled through totally correctly, but this would show the floor plans for plots 3 and 4, which house the 1-bedroom apartments. The ground floor is going to be used as undercroft parking, so there would be 3 spaces there, but unfortunately that hasn't pulled through. This is the front elevation for that apartment building, so this would be facing out towards the rest of the development. And here we have the rear, which includes the private balcony spaces for both flats. Plots 5 and 6 would also be 3-bedroom dwellings, much the same in appearance as plots 1 and 2. This is the floor plan for them, and here is the elevation drawings for that building. 7 and 8 is the apartment block, which would face towards Connaught Close, adjacent to the grass verge. So this is the floor plan for that. You can see the front elevation, which is the elevation that would face towards Connaught Close there, and the side elevation that would face towards 20 New Road. And here we have the rear elevation. And just finally, as far as plans go, we have a street scene drawings, just showing the buildings in context. Bird's eye overview of the site. You can see the recreation ground directly behind the site there to the west. Now this is a photograph taken on site, which is the side boundary. You can see one of the garage buildings there, and that building to the side is number 8 Connaught Close. You can see a window in the side elevation, which I believe is for the stairway. This is just a view out from the entrance to the site, not the crossover to the grass verge, but the existing entrance to the garage. I included it, as you can just see, there's been an extension into the roof of the property opposite there, just to give a bit of context with regards to floors. Here we are looking along the boundary, which is shared with 20 New Road. It's hard to see the entire site because there's quite a few buildings there, but just to give you an impression of that, and there is a further shot later on of that boundary. Sorry. Effectively, this is the boundary shared with the southern boundary of 20 New Road. This is largely in the direction in which the rear elevation of the apartment building housing units 7 to 8 would look. And this would be part of the parking area proposed, which will be accessed via the crossover over the verge. You can see the back of number 18 and number 22A New Road here also. And this is looking roughly from that position back towards the rear of the site. This is the grass verge in question, which would be crossed over. The wall that borders that will be maintained as much as possible. Obviously, it will have to be cut into to make allowance for their entrance, but in general, that wall would be retained. Apologies, it's not a great shot, but this is just showing the rough location of one of the rear gardens, which would be Unit 1, and that's 8 Connaught Close again there. Again, as promised, there's another view of the western elevation of 20 New Road. You can see the side elevation of Unit 6 would be fairly close to the boundary. As you can see, is a flat roof extension, which appears to be used as a workshop, but was initially a garage. There's one final view, looking towards the rear of the site. You can just see the recreation ground beyond there. And just to include the last plan, this is a location plan from the original submission, which included 9 dwellings. You can see the main change here is that obviously the number of units has been reduced, and the crossover area has been narrowed substantially, so to reduce the amount of verge that would be lost as a result of the proposal. Now, the surrounding area is residential in character, so it's considered that the proposal is in keeping with its surroundings and certainly more in keeping than the current operation of the site. A petition was received objecting to the development, and it was considered that valid concerns were raised within this petition regarding concerns over loss of privacy and the loss of a fairly large section of the grass verge. Since the receipt of the petition, the negotiations have been made with the applicant. I'll just go back to the layout. Sorry to do this, go through it all, but just to show you the layout as current. There we go. So as you can see, the cutting into the grass verge has been reduced. Also, the windows on the southern elevation of the apartment building 7 and 8, I think I've got a laser pointer on it, haven't I? So this building here, there were a number of windows serving habitable rooms on this elevation, and there was concern that they would be too close to windows on the opposite properties on Connaught Close. So there's been adjustments made to the fenestrations in order to overcome those concerns. All new units will be provided with adequate internal floor areas, and the design of the proposal is considered to be acceptable and in keeping with surrounding development. There are some areas in which the application is not fully compliant with the standards of the Council's Residential Layouts SPD, which I will set out now. There is a slight shortfall in amenity space. To break it down, 3-bedroom houses, we'd generally stipulate 60 square metres of amenity space. I can say Unit 1 provides 52 square metres, Unit 2 45 square metres, Unit 6 52 square metres, Unit 5 has an oversupply of 75 square metres. There's also a shortfall in the amenity space to the rear of apartments 3 and 4, and the Units 7 and 8 don't have any communal space. To offset this, we have to bear in mind that the site is located adjacent to the Connaught Recreation Ground, and so in this instance, on balance, we have to factor that in, that amenity space can be provided on the recreation ground. The arrangement of the windows, primarily here in this is Unit 7 and 8 again. So the habitable room windows here would be closer than 21 metres to habitable room windows on the opposite buildings here, which is not in compliance with our general 21 metre requirement. Again, in this instance, we see this to be acceptable due to the constraints of the site, particularly the shape, the size, and the fact that this can be regarded as a muse-style development. There are no windows on existing properties that will be subject to overlooking from habitable rooms within 21 metres. I draw your attention to the addendum. There's been some additional comments from the public, and there's also been, sorry, I looked at the wrong addendum there, a slight change in the recommendation, because the originally submitted location plan, as you see here, doesn't show the crossover within the red edge area. So in light of that, we've requested an additional plan, which has now been supplied, to show that red edge area. And this will mean that while a motion for a recommendation can be made here, if it was to be approved, we would need to have a reconsultation period. Condition 6, we've just removed the requirement for living walls and roofs, as we didn't feel this was a valid requirement for this scheme. And also, just to draw your attention, the wording in the report had referred to 5 visitor spaces. This is actually 4 spaces, so just to be clear on that. Thank you very much.
James? Yeah, if I can just come in to add to a few of the points James said. So just to clarify, one of the issues raised by the neighbours was parking, and the scheme does comply with the parking standards, so there'd be a need for 12 parking spaces, and 12 are provided for the scheme. In terms of the amenity space, what our HDAS says is that exceptions to garden area requirements will only apply in special circumstances, such as the provision of small non-family housing, predominantly made up of one-bed units, in town centres, or the provision of small non-family housing above shops. However, even in these areas, care should be taken to provide some usable and reasonable private outdoor amenity space, perhaps in the form of balconies. Larger flatter developments in town centres in excess of 10 units are expected to provide adequate private amenity space having regard to the above guidelines. So there's a couple of points here. So there are guidelines in terms of amenity space, and this is a quite unusually shaped site, and it's also next to a recreation ground. So we, in trying to work with the applicant to revise the scheme, we did reduce it from 9 to 8 units, but we felt that to get all of the units to have a strict compliance with HDAS garden standards, you'd actually result in quite a sizable drop in units, and this is a MU-style development proposal next to a park that's making use of redundant brownfield site, and it's a quite awkward shaped site. So we did feel on balance that there are some benefits to this scheme, and that they would outweigh the slight non-compliance with HDAS. Obviously, it is a scheme of less than 10 units, so that also provides some justification. I think once you've got more than 10 units, it's slightly more difficult because of the way our HDAS is worded. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, we do have a petition on this one. Is there anybody here on behalf of the petitioners who wishes to speak? No? Not getting any movement. Anyone on behalf of the agent or the applicant? No? Good. Okay, right.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder if officers could just explain how they've calculated the parking spaces. I would have assumed that a 3-bedroomed house would warrant for more parking space than a 1-bedroom flat, but it would appear that we've just allowed 1 parking space for each property that's being built. And I would believe that we need 12 parking spaces, not 8.
The report appears to suggest there's 12, although I can't exactly find them all.
We were working on... 8 of which are for... Yeah, we're working on 1 space for the flats, so that's 4 spaces, and then you've got a further 8 spaces on site, so you could either do 2 per house or 1.5 per house and have visitor spaces, but...
What about the visitors, though? That's 8 plus 4.
But the scheme is providing 12 parking spaces, so if you were applying a 1 space per flat and 2 space per house, then it is a compliant scheme. So the reason the officer outlined the slight shortfalls on the external amenity spaces, that's the bit that the scheme isn't fully compliant. It isn't the parking that it's not fully compliant.
Well, I can't say I'm still happy that there's enough parking spaces.
You know, if it complies, that becomes the bottom line. Councillor Dillon, then Councillor Morgan.
Question on the amenity space, the recreation ground. So if, as far as I see it, it's fenced off from the flats. So to access it, you would have to go round to the recreation ground.
How is your key
how do you
question?
get to it? How long would it take? Because if it's a long walk, people tend not to use it, to be honest with you.
Thank you. I don't have the exact distance to hand, but I would say that the walk to the recreation ground would entail going to the end of Connaught Close, up New Road, and there's no main roads that need to be crossed. You turn left directly at the junction there, and that's where then it's accessed. So I don't recall the exact figure, but it's certainly not a lengthy walk, and there's no major roads that would need to be crossed.
I come left. Councillor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to go back to the parking, because on the plans that we have, plots 3 and 4 actually have undercroft parking. Now, assuming that these plans are right, that takes up 6 spaces, because undercroft it's got 3 under each one. In which case, that now leaves us 6 spaces for the remaining 6 dwellings.
Does that assume that all the undercroft is allocated to the flats above it?
Would you want somebody else's car under your property?
I don't know. It's a point. Okay. Well, okay. Councillor Higgins, you were next.
Yeah, I don't know what... We seem to keep having this issue about the access to the parking. Those parking spaces are behind someone's garden, I presume. Is that correct? When you first access. Where the tree is in the middle. Yeah, there. Yeah,
Right.
That building there is their rear garden, correct?
Yes, that is the property at 20 New Road.
So I don't understand. Why couldn't that have been flipped? If you just sort of flip it over, that the parking is outside the properties, and that leaves no starting up of engines or it's an element of design that's just very poor. We had this again down Swakeleys Road. We keep backing on cars onto someone else's garden when it'd be easier just to put them on the other side. And I don't know whether that can be amended.
I mean, if members were acceptable in all other respects, that would be a very simple plan change, and I'm aware that there are no on-site planning constraints that would give me any concerns that could be easily undertaken.
Okay.
Well, that's great. I mean, the trouble. All I can say is that, I mean, I'm reluctant, but I'd have to go with officer's recommendation on this anyway, because it's compliant just with everything. So. Apart from these.
Okay, so we'll hold the thought on parking and remind me in a moment. Councillor Edgington, you indicated.
I did. Thanks, Chair. I wondered whether, bearing in mind the lack of amenity space and the reference to using the recreation ground, whether there could be a condition to have gates from 1 to 6, properties 1 to 6, to access it directly from their gardens.
Oh God, do you know something that...
Well, on so many levels for security reasons that you wouldn't want that. You know, that means that from the recreation people can get access onto people's properties. I would feel very uncomfortable with that, to be honest.
I imagine that you can lock gates. Wouldn't be any different from a fence, to be honest.
Then who's going to have access to keys? Anyway, I don't want to get this into debate. This is between you.
Sorry, we're talking about individual gardens. So it'd be the individual owners would have access. We've got 6 gardens there, amenity spaces which aren't large enough. Just a thought.
I'll take it off to comment on that if I might. I don't know who wants it.
I mean, as a former head of green spaces, and I know that the Councillor Higgins is a former cabinet member responsible for green spaces. I don't think. I think my property and green spaces colleagues would not support that proposal. In terms of the short space on the shortfall of amenity space, it's one of those issues and I'm going to be very frank, I'm afraid, to the committee, that if we go to appeal, we kind of know what's going to happen. Therefore, one of the benefits of approving this is that we can withdraw permitted development rights and put a number of controls on the development. We can do a 106 with bollards, we can get some tree planting in the verge. We can possibly achieve more than where, we've been quite, hopefully been quite honest to committee. There are a couple of shortfalls with this scheme, but we think on balance, the better options to approve.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of problems with this. Yes, it's fine for residential. Yes, it's an awkward shaped site. It's difficult to work. You've got residential constraints, but it's falling down on amenity space. We've already discussed that and why, and I agree with that. If you've got houses, these are family dwellings, and you need more space than is provided for these. One-bed flats, not such a bother. You can have a balcony or something that opens in hot weather, but I think for family dwellings, no. The distance between buildings also doesn't meet our standards. When the officer did his presentation, he referred to that. So there will be some overlooking. Number 22, which it looks as if part of their garden has been taken as this site. Now, I understand we have to deal with what is before us, but number 22 now has little garden, and in addition, as Councillor Higgins has said, now has cars parked at the end of it. The height of the building seems excessive compared with other developments that we've had recently. I mean, for a two-storey building, it's 9.7. We recently had a two-storey building that was pegged at 7.8 because people did not want it to go higher than that and to become a three-storey building. The three-storey building, if we look at plots 3 and 4, the two-storey building, it's got a deep roof. Three-storey building, it's got a deep roof. All these have the potential to become much more. It's fine limiting this by condition, as the officer advises, and quite correctly. But the point is, if we've already allowed these buildings to be built at this height, this scale, and with this erosion of our own standards, it would be very difficult to resist any future application that did want to develop those areas. So what we're talking about, whatever it's described as, is quite a chunk of building here. And I see that residents have, in their letters of objection and the petition, say it's too big a project for a limited area. And quite frankly, I agree with them.
Can I just pick up the garden project?
Sorry,
the other bits are well argued, but it was the garden element of 22 that the head of planning was...
22 New Road hasn't lost any garden. They all... some of these, not the Connell Close, because they're all clearly family dwelling houses, but some of these other dwellings are quite unorthodox in their layout. So you can see this photo shows that there's a tall fence and there's a very short existing garden. So there's already a hard standing behind this house. This proposal isn't eating any further into their garden.
No, but it's confirming this garden has been bought up at some point, possibly by a future owner, and so there is no prospect of that building ever having adequate amenity space.
Okay, can I... we'll hold that for a second. Can I go to Councillor Edwards?
Tiny clarification. I believe in the presentation, I may have misheard, when we were talking about amenity space for 5 and 6, you were saying that one exceeded and one was under, whereas the report says they both comply. So, did I mishear?
I don't think you necessarily did.
So, with regards to units 5 and 6, unit 6, based on the calculation I've taken, is 52 metres squared, so that's a shortfall of 8. Unit 5 has approximately 75 metres squared space. So apologies.
No, fine. I just wanted to clarify that. Well, for me, it's a further simplification, which is amending the fence lines such that at least those two houses comply,
we can move forward a tiny bit on that one, I would have thought.
Commentary?
Yeah, if I just take you back to the layout plan. Sorry to sit through things like this all the time.
It's fine. You take your time.
Okay, so here, this is unit 5 and 6 here.
6 has deliberately been squeezed in.
Yeah.
You could just push it back out a bit, make that compliant, and the other one compliant. But at least we're moving forwards a little bit better.
Yeah, so, yeah, because that's the boundary line there. So, yeah, and you can see unit 5, the garden's actually distributed between 2 segments like that. Yes.
Well, we'll hold that thought for a second, because that may be, I think that's 2 suggestions on this in a minute. It's getting worse. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you very much.
No, I can remember these 2.
Sorry, could the officers confirm, please, the cycle storage area and the bins outside plots 7 and 8? Is that for the whole site? So people in plot 5 will have to take their storage, their rubbish, to outside plots 7 and 8?
No, my understanding is that that's just to serve the flat unit there. You might not be able to see entirely from the plans, but each unit does have its own cycle store in the back garden there, and I imagine that would be the arrangement for the bin storage as well. It's just, I've picked one out there, I think. But
and houses we would expect anyway, normally to be collected from the curtilage, would we not? They don't necessarily have to provide themselves with a bin store. Well, weekly from, yes, okay, all right, point taken. Okay, so at the moment, if I've got this, we've got a suggestion on something that would run along the lines of notwithstanding condition to amend the garden spaces that 5 and 6 actually both comply. We have a movement to the parking spaces if we approve to flip them round down there. Councillor Duncan is unhappy with it in most respects, I think. Yes, I think in general, but beyond that, most other people don't seem to have joined you on this one at the moment. That may be me, but I think that's a fair summary of where we are. Oh, James wishes to be helpful.
If I can help members on one other point. So the point that one of the concerns was the shortened distance between windows. So this is on the first 2 houses. They're front windows fronting the front of the units 7 and 8. So this Muse style arrangement, there is precedent for it in the RFE scope development. So what we've always done, taken a very hard line on, is when you've got windows overlooking a neighbour. So we would then strictly apply the 21 metres. But there is precedence in this borough of in Muse style type developments, because if you think of a typical arrangement on some streets, the front of one dwelling and the front of another dwelling are often less than 21 metres apart in more narrow streets where there isn't large front gardens in place. So it would be quite obvious to any purchasers of these units that the front of the 2 dwellings are facing each other, but the rear elevations aren't compromised, and that there aren't any issues.
Okay, Councillor Edwards.
I was going to ask for clarification on exactly that point, so thank you very much.
Okay, I think we're getting to the point of having to move this one. Councillor Gibbs, you got one more for me?
Yeah, just obviously I'm going my parking a bit here. See how we can redraw.
Don't redraw the whole plan.
No, I won't. Some of the members had some issues about allocations of parking to properties. So where we enter, where that disabled parking is, would it be possible to refigure that area, some of those spaces? Yeah, that those spaces are two of those spaces, or one of those spaces, are actually outside each of those properties. Is there a way of reconfiguring that?
Yeah. Let's tie it up there. Quick view.
I've been in a meeting with the applicant, and it's quite a tight development. I think there's no problem. They're very simple changes. The garden boundary and the flipping the small 4-space car park entrance.
Okay.
Because they won't cause any
So I'll go
major issues. But
I will put that forward with those changes.
Okay, let me just clarify the changes that we've got. We've obviously got the changes as per the addendum, because there needs to be a reconsultation. We've got an amendment to the garden divisions of, or notwithstanding the agreed plans, the amenity space for units 5 and 6 needs to be divided so they are both compliant. And we've got an amendment to the plan, again, notwithstanding the agreed plans, that the 4 parking spaces are moved to outside the dwellings and not at the end of the other house. Does that make sense? Is that what members have got for me? Good. That's proposed. Do I have a second?
I will second.
Right. All those in favour, please clearly show. 1, 2, what have I got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Those against? 2. 6 to 2. Right. That one goes through. Right. That's the first one done. Right. I'm now moving to item 9, Woodbridge House, New Windsor Street, Uxbridge, page 117.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 9 on the agenda is an application for the redevelopment of Woodbridge House. Members will recall the application was previously presented to Planning Committee on the 3rd of August last year. The application proposed the demolition of the existing almshouses and the construction of a new almshouse complex to provide 20 one-bedroom flats, 2 number 2-bedroom flats for live-on-site staff, and additional 8 number 1-bedroom flats intended for open market rental to people aged 65 and over. I can just take people through the plans. Okay, my apologies, this will take a little while because we're out of order. Okay. So here we are, this is the site plan. This is the constraints plan showing the conservation area and the locally listed building, which is the current almshouses. This is the layout plan. This is the elevations of the existing listed building. There's the rear elevations. And this is the proposed layouts, which members will all be aware of. That's ground floor, first floor, second floor, and roof plan. And then there's the elevations of the proposed new building. And here's the aerial image, photos of the existing site, photos from within the gardens in the site, looking out at buildings that surround it. It's quite a constrained site. Okay, and I'll stop there. So members will recall that the previous discussions held at the meeting on the 3rd of August, the minutes of which are included in the amended officers' report. Members previously resolved the application should be approved, subject to including 100% provision of M43 housing, the market flats be at affordable rent, and other additional details such as the design of the cloister, materials, and a photographic record of the site. Following the resolution of Planning Committee, the applicant has commissioned a financial viability appraisal to demonstrate that the development on its own would not be financially viable with the committee's proposed wider public benefits included, in particular, market flats at an affordable rent. Officers have, through a third-party financial appraiser, identified that the scheme on its own would not be viable with the wider public benefits included. Given Planning Committee's resolution that the scheme should also be fully M43 compliant, officers invited the applicant to enter into negotiations to see what additional access benefits the scheme could incorporate, over and above standard requirements, in order to outweigh the loss of the heritage asset as required by Planning Committee. However, a compromise solution was not agreed prior to the publication of the committee report. The application is presented in the committee report with a recommendation for refusal, as whilst officers understand why no market flats to provide additional revenue would render the scheme unviable, they did not agree with the applicant's stance on accessibility at the time the committee report was published. As set out in the addendum, however, the Council's access officer has proposed a compromise of attaching a planning condition to any grant of planning consent to secure all units, bar the 10% that are required to be fully M43 compliant, being constructed to M42 standards, but having M43 bathrooms. This was suggested to the applicant, and the applicant has agreed that such a condition would be acceptable. So I can take you forward to the next plan. This is a redrawn version of the internal units with the bathroom wall moved slightly to create a slightly larger bathroom that would be M4(3) compliant. The application is presented to committee with a recommendation for refusal. However, given that the committee did indicate previously that it would be minded to approve the application, at the end of the report is a list of suggested conditions, and members will note the additional access condition attached within the addendum should committee resolve to approve the application. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. There is a petition and objection to this one. And let me just clarify, because this discussion is going to sound slightly strange when we do it. We will hear your petition, but obviously please bear in mind that the planning committee does have to give very large weight to its 3rd of August decision, because on the 3rd of August last year, the planning committee, subject to a public benefit test, and that's the big argument on this one, did accept the loss of the heritage asset. So that is kind of where we're starting from. So just let me, just to be absolutely clear so everyone understands where we are. So can I have the petition and objection, which is Annie Cantwell? If you press the button on the middle of that microphone, it will light up. Thank you.
Right. Good evening, councillors, chairman and members of the public. My name is Annie Cantwell, and I've been living at 47B The Lynch for the last 25 years. I also own what was the first cinema in Uxbridge, known then as Rockingham Hall, and owned by the entrepreneur Jack Hutton. This building backs onto Woodbridge House. We all know that Woodbridge House is a locally listed building within the Rockingham Road Conservation Area. I had the opportunity to demolish my building as it was considered unfit for purpose. However, I had the vision to remodel the inside of the property and keep the exterior true to the nature of the area and the style as it was when I acquired this property. It now acts as offices serving local businesses and has been used to hold meetings for the local community when we have experienced problems within the local area. The story of the almshouses, as one councillor put it, it's not that old. At the time, the garden suburb style was not commonplace, and the planning laws allowing other garden suburbs to be built wasn't put into place until 1 year later. We believe that the architecture of the new design is not iconic enough. It is not sympathetic in design to the local area, which is surrounded by Victorian properties. And we, the residents, believe that the height of the proposed building would be oppressive and dominate the surrounding skyline. We are under the impression that this meeting has been called as the Trust failed to meet the conditions set in the last meeting, such as providing disabled accommodation and affordable rents for all units. And the Trust states that this project can only be cost effective if market rental units equally approximately 1 floor are included. The Trust has recently made property purchases such as 43 The Lynch, so we do not believe that the Trust does not have the funds for a 2 or 3 storey almshouses, excluding market rental. As one of the councillors stated in the previous meeting, this is a charity, not a business. Local residents are particularly upset about the market rental units and the effect this would have on parking, which is already a problem for residents in the U4 zone. And further difficulties may be introduced by the new development on Cape Fassnage land, which only includes 4 parking spaces. We have seen the right to light surveys and seen that they will decrease the amount of light to our properties when the raw numbers are read. The survey concluded that although light levels would decrease, there was no overall significant difference. However, we disagree with this and request that the Trust take readings from our properties for a right to light survey. Residents are also concerned about security, as the current plans do not seem to have restricted or gated access, given the historic issues where the Trust was advised by the police to increase its security because thieves were gaining access to burgle residents on the Lynch from Woodbridge House. The noise will affect people working from home, such as myself, the offices on the Lynch, and other neighbours that also work from home, as we do have flexible working now. And obviously, Councillor Higgins, you are not voting in this. That was something the residents requested that you did not. To summarise, we are not happy with demolition, the materials and design, the height, the parking, the security. Thank you for listening.
You just stay there a second. Does anybody have any questions? No, thank you very much. No, I'm going. Who's speaking for the applicant on this one? You just state your name for the record, then we'll begin. Could you put the microphone on for me, otherwise we'll struggle.
Yeah. Good evening. My name's Stephen Melvin. I'm the architect agent for this application. So late this afternoon, a technical proposal was received from officers attempting for the second time to impose the M43 standard on the units, which were designed to be M42 compliant. As I will mention later in this presentation, the first attempt was found to be unworkable. This latest attempt, seeking to impose an M43 standard to the bathroom areas within M42 units, whilst failing to achieve any real benefit for potential occupiers, has been presented far too late in the day to be properly assessed. I received it via email at 4 p.m. this afternoon. Although we are advised the officer report has been amended to reflect the applicant's agreement to this 11th hour proposal, I cannot state to you that potential issues I am now going to outline will not arise. Accordingly, I request that you consider the case that follows in support of granting permission for the development as it has been proposed by the Welfare Trust. At your meeting on the 3rd of August 2016, you unanimously resolved to grant permission for this redevelopment of Woodbridge House to provide modern arms housing, subject to 2 additional requirements, which, following thorough investigation, have been found to render the scheme undeliverable for both physical and economic reasons. The 100% M43 expands the footprint beyond the site boundary and encroaches on the access and parking arrangements, and the 100% affordable housing requirement compromises the funding. The applicant has commissioned considerable additional time and resources in examining the possibility of accommodating members' requests through preparation of a viability appraisal, including input from a number of consultants. You will have seen the viability report by Kempton Carr examining the financial implications in the context of the 100% affordable, and officers have accepted and now reported that the scheme cannot bear the imposition of further affordable housing at the loss of the open market rent over and above the 66% heavily subsidised almshouses already offered. I have a series of diagrams to illustrate the physical implications of M43, whether in whole or as hybrid, if members wish to question me later. The access officer has suggested a hybrid M43, M42 can adopt the same footprint. Our access consultant has been unable to corroborate this. I do not see how making kitchens M42 and the remaining areas of the unit meet M43, or bathrooms M43 and the remaining areas of the unit M42 will reduce the unit size sufficiently to adopt the current footprint without compromising the overall use and appeal of the units. At this point, it's important to understand what the M43 and M42 categories really achieve. M43 is a wheelchair user dwelling. It's the highest level of accessibility. They are only suitable for people who are permanently in a wheelchair, which will never be the case for all the occupants in this almshouse and sheltered housing development. M42, members may not realise that M42 is itself a highly accessible standard. Outside London, M41 is the base requirement, with M42 being a considerable accessibility and adaptability enhancement, as per the old Lifetime Home standard. Members should also be aware of the Council's supplementary planning document, Accessible Hillingdon, which cautions against the creation of disability ghettos. The guidance emphasises that wheelchair user dwellings should be evenly distributed within developments to counter these adverse consequences. I remain convinced that the scheme as proposed will best serve the community. While the applicant is willing to accept a hybrid application that does not affect the footprint and appeal of the units, I do not see that this is possible. Of course, a developer looking at this site would consider the scenario not viable. Were it not for there being an organisation in the borough that is willing to take on this challenging site and determined to provide age-appropriate specialist arms housing, it simply wouldn't happen. This alone provides substantial benefit and more than sufficient, in our opinion, to outweigh the loss of Woodbridge House, which was agreed at your August meeting to be inconspicuous from public vantage points, diminished in value from earlier unsympathetic changes, and consequently not a particularly fine example. Despite recognising the proposed scheme is in deficit in viability terms, the Welfare Trust has an obligation and determination to house its residents in dignified and fit-for-purpose accommodation, and will do so on a philanthropic basis. In light of all the foregoing, it is requested that members reconsider the merits of the proposal and substantial benefit it brings, and resolve to grant permission for the development, as it was originally submitted, with 100% accessible and adaptable M42 lifetime home units, including 4 units constructed to M43 wheelchair standard, representing 13.3%, which is higher than the London Plan recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, that's a little surprising, but given that I understood a conversation was had with officers this afternoon where the applicant had accepted the suggestions, but you're presenting on behalf of the applicant, so we'll take that as the applicant's position. Do members have any questions?
I think the applicant's position is that if it can be demonstrated that these units can be a hybrid without altering the footprint, then the applicant would accept it. But I can't corroborate that yet, because this latest intervention I received at 4 p.m.
Okay. I just wanted to get that clear for everybody. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions before we open debate on this one? Okay, you want to start me off? Thank you very much. If you just turn the microphone off for me, that would be helpful. Who wants to start me? Councillor Edwards, Councillor Morgan?
Thank you. The loss of a heritage site, for me, must deliver significant public benefit. And we had put a marker in where we considered that significant public benefit to be. Now, I've heard from the petitioner when he's talking about the application of policy, but that is to the general norm. What we're talking about here is a very specific set of accommodation for a very specific cohort of people. This is supporting people in later life, where their needs will be significantly different to those of a typical development. Therefore, the standard of 10% M43 for me is at the very lowest end of the market and probably not applicable here. I would expect it to be higher, lest we have to move people around the development as their needs change. I also think that my own experience with sheltered accommodation is the risk around bathing with baths and showers that are not level access wet room is such that we expose such residents to risk to their own health and injury and consequent hospitalisation and cost to the public purse. Therefore, for me, it is an absolute given that the bathrooms must be sufficient to meet the needs of people at later life who are infirm and are likely to be increasingly infirm. I do accept the argument around the kitchens and whether or not that needed to be fully wheelchair compliant, but that was never my expectation. It was more about the doorways, whether they were significantly accessible to people who may occasionally use frames, wheelchairs, whether this is for emergency services, ambulances to take to hospital appointments, a whole ream of needs. Therefore, I think we should put a marker in the ground that for me to agree the loss of the heritage site, that public benefit needs to be far higher than was offered by the petitioner or the agent on this occasion. It is a shame that it appears that the compromise has been withdrawn.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Morgan was my next one. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with Councillor Edwards on this. It appears that after a number of months that we're no further forward than the marker that we put down back in August of last year. And consequently, I'm in favour of the officer's recommendations.
Anybody else going to join this particular debates? Councillor Yarrow?
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, we can either go nuclear or we can attempt to get to the bottom of this. And I would like to think that, as the applicant has said, he can't agree with what we've said because he hasn't had the time in which to prove those figures. I would like to give him some more time, and consequently the only way of doing that and to get what we want and what they want is to say I'd like it to be deferred again and actually get to the bottom of this and get some kind of agreement if that's possible.
Well, the applicant, to be fair, has had 10 months to sort this out. A number of suggestions have been made by the access officer. The access officer this afternoon was attempting to put in writing a potential compromise condition, which I understood we were likely to see some acceptance of. It's disappointing that now appears to be moving in another direction. I'm not sure what deferring this would achieve. I think we almost need to create our bottom lines on this, and we hold them, and we take it from there. But I'll be guided.
If I can slightly help committee, so I was conscious once the report had been published, I was effectively only really giving committee two options of a sort of approving something that went against what you previously agreed, or refusing something which also went against what you previously agreed, which is why I thought that the contribution of the Council's Access Officer was extremely helpful. Now, I appreciate that the applicant has had very little time to consider it, but what I do know is that the Access Officer has worked on plans and is confident that the one sort of step change, if I can use that expression, that could be done to the scheme that would be a tangible benefit that he's convinced could be done within the same footprint is to improve the bathrooms. Hence, the addendum proposes a condition that will, I've had discussions with the access officers today that officers are convinced is workable. I don't think a deferral is going to change. All that's going to happen then is that we're going to end up with more information from the applicant, but it won't change the access officer's views. So it may make things even more difficult for you.
Just can I move to one other issue, just so I get total clarity from committee and clarity for the public as well. The other element of this was that we were asking for the whole of the development to be affordable housing, effectively. Now, the applicant has done a viability assessment which confirms that isn't viable. Officers, I think, are accepting that assessment. Are we therefore withdrawing from...
Yeah, so it'd be inappropriate for me to start quoting numbers of a confidential financial viability.
Which we haven't seen.
But it is a clear cut. The way these viability appraisals are done is on the site on its own. You don't start bringing in people's bank balances, assets, or anything else. It's purely the viability of the scheme itself. And the financial viability third-party appraiser, who's someone we've used many times as officers, is absolutely clear that the applicant needs that private element to make the scheme work. So that bit is actually, I appreciate I can't share all the figures with you, but it is quite clear from the officer perspective, albeit the accessibility issues may be slightly less clear.
Okay, that's Councillor Duncan.
Thank you. Just on that one point, I remember when we were dealing with Fasnage that you have to include the land value as if you have just bought this site into the viability, whereas this land is already owned, so you don't have that cost. So if I could go out and build 30 flats on a free piece of land in Uxbridge tomorrow and not make it viable, well, I would need to be shot, I would think. But anyway, I realise there are rules about this, but we need to bring some common sense to it. I agree very much with my colleagues opposite, fellow committee members, on their comments. the one thing that struck us when we went round this building, and it was very useful to make that site visit, was how it did not and could not, in its present form, meet modern day requirements for people with disabilities to have independent living. And we heard sad stories of people who had been in first floor flats who were unable to come out of hospital and were bed blocking. And clearly this is a very much needed development, and I think we all wanted to support that. One of the things in the report talks about if the bathrooms are expanded in size, then the living room and bedroom becomes smaller, or one or both. And I just wondered if that then becomes more difficult for a wheelchair user to navigate around those spaces with the necessary furniture. I mean, I agree the necessity of having a bathroom that a wheelchair user can use, but if it then makes it virtually impossible for them to have other parts of their accommodation to the standard that is required, then I would like to know if that is the case, please.
So our access advisor is saying that the bathroom he would wish to see be 1 square metre larger. That's all.
But it did reduce because it was coming into the living room area and the bedroom areas, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So,
obviously that 1 square metre will have an impact, but because it's just one room in the flat, it's not that the condition's not trying to seek that all the corridors, the kitchen, everything is dealt with. It's just the bathroom that he feels that you could get the rest of the layout to work, and he's the access expert, and we know he's sat down and worked through plans and drawings, and hence why there was actually a slide to show he's gone to that length.
it was very helpful to see that slide and to be reassured about that. But certainly we're in the business of approving plans, and it's the plans that we approve subject to conditions. So we would need to see plans to see how that affected the living room and the bedroom and access to that and wheelchair access and how the wheelchair could turn in those rooms. We don't have that at the moment. And without seeing that, I would like to have that information.
Yeah, I just for clarity, and I maybe I've missed something, but I just want to be clear a minute. In terms of these flats, we're not saying, are we, that all the doorways and everything else would be wheelchair accessible. We're saying that the bathroom effectively would suit people with increasing levels of disability. It may not be wheelchair, but increasing levels of disability. But the rest of the flat would be the normal lifetime home standards of M42.
Yeah, so what we're saying is for the, put aside the 10% M43, the 90% M42, that you'd have the M42 standard with the exception of the bathroom. That's what the condition is saying. And what Ali, our Kashmiri, our access officer, is saying is he thinks that simple change would be a very useful change for, he says a convenient and accessible bathroom is usually the single most important component to a wheelchair user or someone with a very elderly person or someone with a sort of a less mobile person, and that if that change was done, which he doesn't think would have a huge financial impact, that he thinks you could reconfigure the layout and still that it wouldn't prevent the rest of the internal layout being M42 compliant, because we're not trying to achieve that the rest of those layouts be fully M43 compliant. We're only trying to achieve M42 compliance.
The point is, if somebody is in accommodation because they're in a wheelchair, they don't, when they suddenly come out of the bathroom, have the ability to stand up and not need that facility elsewhere in their property. If you make something M43 compliant because you're gearing it up for wheelchair users, you can't only make part of it. That's illogical to do that. The whole accommodation
the effect of the applicant's argument is that to do that would make the scheme unviable because of the need to increase the size of the flats and so forth.
So there is an agreement between, I think there's an agreement between the council's access officer and the applicant that if you go beyond the M43 bathroom proposal and make all the flats M43 compliant, then I think both are in agreement that you will end up with a bigger footprint, you will end up with a substantial cost increase. Where there's a difference of opinion, as has been expressed tonight, is our council's access officer thinks that if you do the recommendation here of the M43 compliant bathroom, he doesn't think that would be hugely expensive in terms of having an adverse impact on the finances, nor does he think it's an impractical suggestion. He thinks you could still get the remainder of the units to be fully M42 compliant. And he's worked through that with plans, so he's convinced of that position, which is why I was saying I don't think a deferral is going to change the officer position on that.
But if I could just come back, it says on page 123, the site is owned and run by Uxbridge United Welfare Trust. All it's got is building costs here. It hasn't got land costs. And I know there are regulations about development, but I'm sure that somewhere there is some codicil that talks about charitable trust, which is what we are talking about here, as we were with Fasnage, where land has been left for the public good, and yet it's measured by criteria which is about commercial development.
I don't think at this point I can add anything to what I've said previously.
Okay, let me summarise where I think we are with this. And I'm going to try and get it as clear as I can, and hopefully people will correct me if I get it wrong. The officer view of the revised proposal, or of this scheme as it stands, is that we wind up with 20 replacement almshouses, 2 staff flats, and then the remaining 8 flats, which are sheltered units for elderly people, are at market rent. So that's point 1. So that's one variation from where we were on the 3rd of August. Officers have accepted that, and we can debate financial viability assessments and their rules all night, but we all know that they give us some problems. So we just have to kind of take where we are with that for a minute. That to provide fully disabled M43 compliant flats would either increase the footprint and also increase the cost. The council's access officer has put forward a suggestion that we do for the 90% of flats that are M42, we do M42 but with M43 bathrooms, which means that people who may not be in a wheelchair necessarily, but whose mobility is getting more difficult, they're finding it more difficult getting out of the shower and out of the bath and all of those sorts of things, can use those bathrooms. So effectively a wet room. And therefore they're more flexible, and therefore people should be able to stay in their flats for longer than they might do otherwise with a normal bathroom, where as they become more or less able, not disabled but less able, that they might struggle. That has been put forward as a compromise proposal. The applicant's agent is saying he hasn't a chance to check it, so he's not totally accepting it at the moment. So I would take, at this stage, I think committee's got 2 possible ways forward, unless someone's going to give me a third, and I could do without 3, but we'll do 2 for a minute. One is that we effectively put the refusal back on the table. It was there on the 3rd of August. The applicant hasn't come up with an acceptable scheme. You have 2 refusal reasons in your report on page 120, 121. And at this stage, the applicant has not fully accepted, despite earlier indications. Their agent clearly said on record he is not accepting it at this stage, although I think he wishes to investigate it. The alternative is that we take the planning conditions that are at the back of this report on pages 150, 147 onwards. We approve it, subject to the revised condition in the addendum, which effectively has the impact of saying, okay, you can do your scheme, but you're going to have to do the bathroom change we want. If you don't, you can't comply with planning permission. So if the applicant decides that they can't manage that, or it's not going to work for them, well, their planning permission is going nowhere again, because and I would suggest we're not coming back to it again, because, you know, this is, we've put a line. The reasoning on this one is simple. This is the loss of a heritage asset, and the normal stance on loss of a heritage asset is no. That's your starting point for a discussion. You don't normally wish to lose the things. Now, we do all accept that on occasions that has to happen, and, you know, this is a particularly difficult one. So, those, I think, are the choices. There was one more question I just wanted to bottom out before I start to try and move this forward. In the last report, when it was deferred, there was an outstanding condition to be checked or changed with regard to the cloisters on this scheme. Has that actually been done? Have we seen revised plans and cleared that? No, not yet. Right. So that would need an amendment to say, as last time Chairman and Labour lead to agree that we weren't delegating to officers. We wanted to actually see the wording of that to make sure we were 100% happy with what we were getting. Okay, those are the two choices before us. I don't think there's much more debate to be had. I think the head of planning has offered us as much advice as he possibly can. I think we've got the applicant's position. We know that obviously the residents ideally would not like to see this building demolished, but that's kind of where we are at the moment. Can someone take us forward on one of those, and then we'll work from there? Councillor Edwards.
Chairman, I regret that it is far too imprecise what is being suggested. The plans I have before us, these isn't just about making a bathroom slightly different. It's about moving walls. And as such, as a planning committee, this isn't a negotiating chamber. I think we have to look at what's before us, say whether or not a simple condition can change it, or whether what we're talking about is quite a substantial change. And it is. We're talking about completely changing the internal layout of the flats. We believe that could be done. I might have gone on that act of faith, but unfortunately that rug was pulled from me, in that I'm not clear that it can be done in the way that we had hoped. I just feel as though this isn't just a minor adjustment. This is quite a significant redesign of each and every unit. And as such, as a planning committee, we should have the proper plans pulled back before us to see that it all works.
So are you proposing a refusal?
It would be a refusal of what's before me, yes.
Okay, right, okay. I need to take something on this, because I think we've got as many facts as we're getting.
I would go with the officer's recommendations, which is a refusal of the scheme before us.
This will get complicated, so just hold with us. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Morgan. Right, okay. I have a seconder for the proposal that you accept the officer recommendations as per the report, that this is refused for the refusal reasons given on pages 120, 121. All those in... Now, there may be another proposal in a minute, but we'll see where this one goes. All those in favour of refusal, please clearly show me. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Interesting. All those not in favour, or have we got abstentions? I've got 3 and it's 4-3, isn't it? You can't vote. It's 4-3, I think. So 4-3 has it. As tight as it gets. Almost a casting vote time. 4-3 has it, so therefore the application is refused.
I'm sorry you took the vote then, because I wanted to talk about the reasons for refusal and whether our discussion about the units, the M43 units, should have entered into this. We haven't talked about that in the reasons for refusal. And that.
I think the argument the councillor made, which the majority of committee accepted, was that
one of the reasons that it was unacceptable, and which Councillor Edwards proposed in his summing up before he moved that we accept that, was very much to do with our inability to have those possible plans before us at this time. Now, if that's the case, nowhere in this refusal is that stated, which gives an opportunity for that issue to be addressed.
If I can help committee, so the plans before you are the same ones as you were looking at 9 months or so ago, which is why, if I understand what you've done, you determined that application and said if there were some public benefits, you would approve it. You've been told of those public benefits, albeit there's reasons behind the rationale, are not on the table, and then you've effectively gone back to the position, well,
so therefore,
without the public benefits,
we're not doing it.
You don't have justification for loss of a heritage
So therefore,
asset.
effectively, the applicant needs to come back with revised plans.
But the applicant could come back with public benefits, and then you might be back to where you were before, or some form of proposal. But the position I think you've just voted on is that you're back to the position that you as a committee wanted a public benefit and it hasn't been offered. Therefore, it's loss of a heritage asset.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't mention a public benefit.
No, because that was our condition for not refusing.
But
Well. Thank you, James, for your evening. Can I now move to the non-petition items, please? Item 6, page 29, former Royal British Legion.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 6 on the agenda is an application on the former British Legion Club. The site will be familiar to members. The application is for a 7-storey hotel which will provide a total of 108 bedrooms. The structure would reach 21 metres in height and would include basement parking, accessed by way of a car lift that will provide 22 car parking spaces, 3 of which will be disabled bays and 8 cycle parking spaces. Yeah, I'm not sure how we go back.
Yes, cool.
Let him finish. I think we can go through these. Can people see okay?
Yeah. This particular one, I think the Royal British Legion, to those of us who do majors regularly, even if you do it occasionally, you've probably seen this at least once. It's been here so many times.
Yeah, at least once.
At least once a month.
Yeah. If you don't know this one,
If it's not
Okay.
on the majors, it's on the other one, isn't it?
yeah, it's somewhere in the agenda. It's quite.
So, members will know the site as we've just discussed. There's the constraints plan, the location plan. This is the layout plan where you can see the car lifts in this location. This is the basement plan and representative floor plans through the hotel. Here are the elevations of the proposal and some 3D visuals. Importantly, here's the tracking plan that shows that access in and out of the site is feasible. Here's some photographs of the site as it stands at present, and there's the adjacent building. So previous approvals for the redevelopment of the site have established the principle of the development, and there is an extant approval for a 6-storey structure subject to the signing of a Section 106 agreement. The site is flanked by an existing hotel development consisting of buildings of a comparable scale and mass, and it would therefore sit comfortably within the street scene. By reducing the floor-to-ceiling heights of each floor, the finished height of the structure proposed also matches the height of the scheme for the 6-storey building previously consented on the site. Parking provision is adequate, and the site layout allows safe access for public transport and servicing vehicles, including the airport hopper bus. The nearest neighbouring residential properties are a sufficient distance from the development to ensure amenities are not adversely affected. No objections have been raised in terms of security, landscaping, sustainability or drainage matters. In terms of addendum, members will note there is one item on the addendum that confirms the number of disabled parking spaces and cycle parking spaces required by Condition 5 should the application be approved. To conclude, for the reasons summarised, it is recommended that approval be granted, subject to the conditions set out in the report and the signing of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Ed, can I just raise two questions? One will help committee. and the other will save a question from committee. Number of motorcycle spaces, because we've got 2F says motorcycle spaces. I don't know if that means one. It certainly means more than one, so there you go.
At present, there are no motorcycle spaces shown. However, condition 5 does require the including of motorcycle spaces.
Do we know how many?
It doesn't state a number at present.
Actually, it doesn't. It just says condition 5 includes 3 disabled car parking spaces and 8 cycle spaces. Unless I've misread it.
The ratio we apply for motorcycle spaces is 1 per every 20 parking spaces. So, if committee are happy to delegate it, we'll condition that ratio.
Yes. Yes. Councillor Higgins, that's a disagreement for disagreement. I clarify something else with this. They've obviously lowered the ceiling height somewhere along the line, but this is no taller than what we've already approved.
So what they did is they looked at all the ceiling heights. They were aware that committee wouldn't be happy with a taller building, so they've just compressed all the floor to ceiling heights, and effectively they've gained the floor, so there are additional rooms. The members may be aware that this was one that got pulled off a previous agenda. That's because we wanted to get tracking to show that the hopper bus could turn around and go back on itself, and that was the far right hand tracking diagram. That's the important one. So we wanted to make sure that the plans, it's the far right hand one of those, that the hopper bus could go into the forecourt and then come back out again, because we know the hopper bus will need to go back on itself, and they've proven that to our satisfaction. So the 2 issues we kind of came into this application on, I think I'm satisfied, or we're satisfied as officers are
Right,
addressed.
I had Councillor Stead, then Councillor Duncan. Did you? You did put your hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, we've seen this application reasonably the same as it was last time we were looking at it. And my view is that if it fits the hotel's requirements and it meets all our planning and building obligations, then I propose we go with the officer's recommendation.
Now, I'll hold that for 10 seconds, because Councillor Duncan did have a hand up, and I just want to check what she wanted to ask.
I totally agree with that. We've approved this already, but it was a 6-storey building, and you've managed to squeeze another floor out of that. So that means that you've had to take off just under half a metre, just over a foot each floor, haven't you? So has anybody actually looked at these floor-to-ceiling heights? Because, you know, I've heard these kind of claims before, and then, oh dear me, when it comes out and building regs goes down on the site, lo and behold, So, because that sounds like quite a lot. I mean, if this was a taller building, 10, 12 storeys, I wouldn't be bothered about it.
Okay, no, good clarification.
Committee will be approving the plans, and the plans show the building isn't taller.
No. I think I get the councillor's risk that we get bounced back.
We have to look at sections, don't forget. It's not just plans and elevations, sections. What are the... Floor to high floor. Yeah. Are we approving something?
Are we approving something
that people will say, why didn't they look at that?
No, we are happy with the plans. As far as we're aware, there's no breach of building regs. The only point I would say that may help committee is there is a precedent that when you are very concerned over height matters, you impose a particular condition to cap the height. So if this is troubling committee, I know certainly on the central and south you've imposed a condition recently in a circumstance that you were very worried that the height might be exceeded. So it is acceptable, if you think it's justified, to impose a condition capping a particular height of a building.
I would like to do that, because then when they come to fulfil building regs, if they can't, they've got to go back to the 6-storey building.
Councillor Higgins, you were going to add?
Yeah, I mean, the simple question is, what is the floor to height
Well, the floor to ceiling height, somebody over here's got it. I'm
Someone
sure.
must have it. And the question is if you're 6'2", can you fit in it? And if you're only 5 foot,
Well, only.
you can only fit.
Short people only hotel.
Exactly. So that's the thing. And although they're only staying there, I mean, these are not like cubicles in Japan where you just have a bed and just stuff you in.
Look, this is a quality hotel room at Heathrow.
Yeah, sorry. So that's what I can see. What my colleague.
No, and I know where your colleague is coming from entirely.
Because,
but it suddenly becomes a 20-something. Yes, yeah. It slides up a couple of metres in the course of building. Yes.
It is 21 metres in height, so if it's 7 stories, it'd be 3 metres per story.
25. It's only so small. No, you haven't put you've got
Right.
the ceiling in there.
The case officer for this one is sitting quietly, or not very quietly, in the back corner of the room.
She
So I would,
gesticulated in the
would you just
Come and
help
sit
him?
here, please.
Because she does know, so it just is, we might as well have the accurate answers as opposed to guesswork. No, they'll just have a short conflab because we're getting...
As a floor with insulation and fire and time and stuff, yeah.
So the floor to ceiling heights were looked at because that was my initial concern. The original floor to ceiling heights were very generous. The first thing I did check is to make sure that if the floor to ceiling heights were coming down, can they actually fit in the servicing without increasing the height? So I did receive sections, and they do confirm that the floor to ceiling heights will be 2.5 metres, which is the standard for... Yeah.
That's fine.
So that's all fine.
If you've checked it and done the work, that's good enough. Right, Councillor Seb proposed it. Councillor Higgins, I think, has just seconded, or he's done something anyway, so I'll assume he seconded. Can all those in favour please clearly show?
Do you want to delegate an extra condition to me?
Extra condition to make sure it doesn't go above 21 metres, yes. I think that's, sorry, all those in favour, just confirm, thank you. Right, we're done on that one. Right, I'm going to move to something that should be relatively straightforward, hopefully. RAF Uxbridge normally is easier on us, but it won't be tonight, of course. Do we need the larger scale plans back up, or are they not going to be a lot of good anyway? You can't... Yeah, can we just do it? We need as much detail as we can get, because they are quite challenging to read.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 7 on the agenda is an application to discharge reserved matters for Phase 3C of the St Andrews Park development. Members will be familiar with the St Andrews Park scheme, which is currently under construction and for which outline consent was granted in 2010 for residential-led mixed-use development. The proposed scheme would provide 116 residential units, including 76 flats and 40 houses. An important feature of the proposals is the central space that reflects the former playground on the site.
No, they're two separate sites. A lot of it may be familiar when you get to it, but I'm afraid you're getting it wrong.
So here's the layout of the proposals. Here's the central area where which reflects the former playground, and it has play space in the middle, a more formal area here, and then a children's play space. These are TPO trees, so that landscaping belt is protected. There's also a landscaping belt to the south of the site. There are apartment blocks facing onto Hillingdon Road, apartment blocks here, and some smaller ones within the site here, and the rest is houses. So we'll just take you through some elevations. This is the elevations of the apartment blocks onto Hillingdon Road. And there's the bird's eye view. So the principal proposal, including the proposed residential use on the site, was considered and approved as part of the original consent. 155 car parking spaces are provided for residents and visitors, which accords with parking standards. 222 resident cycle spaces and 16 visitor spaces are proposed, plus 4 motorcycle spaces. The scheme has been significantly improved in design terms through negotiations with the applicant in order to resolve initial concerns. No objections to the current proposal are raised on design and landscaping grounds. In addition, there are no objections to proposals in terms of access, security, sustainability or flooding, and the proposal meets the required level of affordable housing as previously approved in the Section 106. With regards to amenity space provision, there is a shortfall of supply, in particular for the proposed flats. The total amenity space on site is 3,309 metres squared, of which private garden areas provide 2,490 metres squared. Overall, 4,250 metres squared required, resulting in a 941 metres squared shortfall. However, whilst any shortfall in provision is regrettable, it is considered that the location of the site close to the new district park and the nearby pocket park, plus the retained landscaping belts to the south and west, results in the proposal being acceptable. It is worth noting that a minor shortfall in the external amenity provision has also been accepted on earlier phases. No letter of objection have been received, and there are no addendum items for this application. Therefore, for the reasons summarised, it is recommended that approval should be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Debate? Councillor Higgins?
Yeah, is there electric car spaces, please? There's no one said any points for charging electric cars.
There are. Would that be in the conditions for the overall?
Mentioned motorcycles, we didn't mention.
It's in the conditions for the outline consent. There is also a plan showing that there will be the appropriate number of passive and current electrical charging spaces.
Because there are very few conditions actually on this, because most of it's in the reserve in the outline consent. Councillor Duncan, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask, is the amenity area and the formal garden area, are they enclosed by a wall or a fence or something like that?
There's a low-level fence that includes the central area.
So that children can be seen, not hidden from view, but they couldn't run out into where the cars are backing or...
That's correct.
Something like that. So, safe for children. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody got anything else on this one, or are we comfortable? No. Right, move off to thank you, Councillor Higgins. That was very well done. Thank you, Councillor Yarrow. All those in favour, please clearly show. That's unanimously approved. I go to item 8, which will be slightly different design, but something very similar.
Thank you, Chairman. Item 8. Okay. Item 8 on the agenda is an application to discharge reserve matters for Phase 6 on St Andrews Park development. The proposed scheme will provide 58 residential units, including 35 three-bed houses, 30 four-bed houses, and 1 two-bed flat. Also within the site are 8 dwellings which are located within the retained Lawrence House and 6 sick quarters buildings. So if I can take members through the approved proposed plans. Here is the retained Lawrence House building and the sick quarters building. And this is the new school, the academy. These are the derelict buildings to the south, and the remainder of the St Andrews Park development is to the south of this site. So here's the proposed layout. And here are some example elevations for proposed dwellings. And here's a street scene. And these are the TPOs on the site. So this is all protected, retained buildings here and here. And also members will note there's a link proposed so that should this development site to the south come forward, a link can be introduced. This is the site as it is at present. Okay, the principle of the proposal, including the proposed residential use on the site, was considered and approved as part of the original consent. 109 car parking spaces are proposed, 99 of which are allocated, plus 10 visitor spaces, which accords with parking standards. All dwellings will have secure cycle parking for 2 bikes, plus there are 8 spaces for visitor cycles. The proposal also approves the required amount of electrical vehicle charging spaces. No objections have been raised in terms of security, conservation, landscaping, sustainability, accessibility or flooding. The design of the proposals is considered to be contemporary and deemed to be of high quality, welcome within the wider site. The proposal meets the required level of affordable housing as previously approved in the Section 106. With regards to amenity space provision, whilst all units have their own private external space, there is again a slight shortfall. There is a provision for 4,993 square metres of private amenity space, which results in a small shortfall of only 131 square metres. Again, whilst any shortfall in provision is regrettable, there are a number of constraints affecting the layout of the proposal, not least the retained buildings, the significant number of protected trees, and the requirement include a potential future link to the properties to the south. These considerations, plus the location of the site close to the new district park, results in the proposal being deemed acceptable. No letters of objection have been received. There are no addendum items for this application, and for the reasons summarised, it is recommended that approval should be granted. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Higgins.
I go to officer's recommendation.
Oh, all those in favour, please clearly show. Thank you. Unanimously approved. 25 to 8. Thank you.